Sarah hated hostels but loved Los Angeles. It was a paradox she had to live with as an aspiring photographer, where budgets were always smaller than ambition. Today she checked into the Nomad's Rest, a chain hostel in the Westlake area, known for its low prices and, as one online review put it, unobtrusive, almost ghostly staff. Her room, No. 304, was a 6-bed dorm, but so far, Sarah was one of only 2 occupants. The second, a woman named Cassie, was in her 40s with a perpetually scowling face, who immediately enclosed her bunk with a thick, impenetrable blue curtain, as if erecting a fortress. Sarah chose the top bunk near the window. Because of the time difference, she lay down early, but sleep wouldn't come. The city noise was muffled by the thick walls, leaving only a quiet, pulsing hum in the room, which felt less like a sound and more like a sensation of pressure. She lay in complete darkness, her thoughts bouncing between the upcoming photo shoot and a feeling of uneasy emptiness. The hostel was strangely silent. Even in the hallway, she couldn't hear the usual creaking floors or drunken laughter common in such places. It was in this silence and darkness that the sensation came to her. Not a sound, not a smell, but a pure, primal certainty that she was being watched. It felt like a cold touch on the back of her neck. Sarah slowly, almost hypnotically raised her eyes to the ceiling. There, directly above the center of the room, was a smoke detector. A white plastic disc blending with the ceiling. It looked standard, too standard, but in its very center, where a power or standby indicator should be, a tiny, barely visible red light glowed. It was smaller than a pinhead, yet in the absolute darkness it looked like a bright, unblinking dot, resembling a malicious narrowed eye. It didn't flash as indicators usually do. It was watching, just watching. Sarah felt an icy cold run down her spine. It wasn't an indicator, it was a lens. Her heart pounded so fiercely that the sound should have woken Cassie behind her blue wall. But Cassie's curtain remained motionless, like a funeral shroud. Taking a deep breath, Sarah, cautiously trying not to make a sound, reached for the phone under her pillow. She needed proof. She needed confirmation that her paranoia wasn't just fatigue. Her fingers trembled as she slowly raised the phone, aiming the camera at the center of the ceiling. She decided to use the flash, a short, sharp light that would give her the evidence, on the count of 3. 1, 2. As she pressed the shutter button, the flash burst blindingly in the dark. In that instant, the flash illuminated the room. The red light vanished. It didn't fade slowly. It was switched off, instantly. Sarah lowered her phone, her breathing shallow and ragged. The camera only captured a flash-bleached spot on the white ceiling. No red light, but now she knew for certain. The one controlling that camera had seen the flash, had seen her trying to film him, and had turned it off. She lay paralyzed in a cold sweat, feeling trapped and humiliated. It seemed to her that from the darkness, from that very smoke detector, came a quiet, satisfied sigh. The next few days turned into agonizing torture for Sarah. Her common sense screamed at her to leave immediately, but her natural stubbornness and desire to prove she was right, along with a lack of money for a new hotel, kept her there. Besides, someone had already seen her. To run now meant admitting defeat and leaving her footage in someone else's hands. Every time she entered the room, her gaze immediately went to the smoke detector. During the day, it looked perfectly innocent. But as soon as night fell, as soon as she turned off the light, the red pupil came back on. Sarah began to experiment. First, she tried to cover the camera. She used chewing gum, which she stuck to the end of a long mop handle to block the tiny hole. She heard Cassie's curtain flicker slightly, but paid it no mind. When she climbed back into her bunk, the light was off. Victory, she thought. 2 hours later, she woke up to a barely audible but distinct sound. Something was scraping against the plastic. She turned on her phone's flashlight. The gum was lying on her pillow. It was warm and damp. On the ceiling, the red light was glowing again, and now it seemed even brighter, as if mocking her. "This is impossible," Sarah whispered. The room was locked with a key only she and Cassie had. Cassie seemingly did not react to the light, the noise, or Sarah's mumbling. She was the epitome of a silent, sullen roommate. Sarah began to document her actions. She took out a notepad and pencil, lay down beneath the camera, and described her paranoia. She spoke aloud, knowing she was being listened to. "If you're watching, listen closely," she said to the ceiling. "I know who you are. I've seen your work. And I'm sure you forgot one very important thing." She paused, letting her statement hang in the air. The red light didn't blink. "You forgot that I'm a photographer. I know how light works. I know how to leave digital footprints." She went to sleep, feeling part heroine, part lunatic. The next morning, Sarah felt strong for the first time. She left the room feeling like she had issued a challenge. She spent the day at the library, studying guides on how to find hidden IP cameras. Most methods required access to the hostel's router, which was impossible. But one caught her attention, searching for IR radiation using her phone's front-facing camera. Many cameras use infrared light for night vision, which is invisible to the human eye but visible to most digital cameras. When she returned, she approached the mirror in the room, which hung above a small desk. She had always thought it was a bit dirty, with unremovable smudges in the corner. She turned on her front-facing camera and saw two tiny purple dots hidden behind the smudge in the top corner of the mirror. They were symmetrical and had the same glow. It wasn't just a reflection. They were two other lenses. Sarah felt her knees buckle. Gasping, she turned to the smoke detector. The red light was blinking, as if saying, "I know what you found, and I know what you are doing." She stopped trying to hide. Instead, she began to act openly. She sat down at the desk, put down her notepad and pencil, and started to draw. She drew diagrams, marking the angles of view of the three cameras on a floor plan. She calculated where their blind spot was located. Her mind, a photographer's mind, accustomed to working with composition, suddenly transformed into a cracking machine. Smoke detector, full room overview, but not the bathroom. Mirror, excellent view of the desk, beds, and entrance. The bathroom. Sarah went into the bathroom. Ventilation, lamp, outlet. Suddenly her eyes fixed on the toilet paper holder. It was a strange, massive black plastic box. She lifted it off the wall. Inside there was no roll of paper. There was a battery and a Wi-Fi module. At that moment, Cassie emerged from behind her blue curtain. She stood in the shadow holding a phone. "What are you doing?" Cassie asked. Her voice was low and dry. Sarah froze, holding the dispenser. I'm looking..." Cassie came closer, and in the dim light from the hallway, Sarah saw that her eyes were red and swollen. "Looking for a camera?" Cassie smiled. It was the creepiest smile Sarah had ever seen. It was genuine and sorrowful. "There are more than you think, dear." Cassie didn't call security. She just stared at Sarah with an expression that Sarah couldn't decipher. "Pity, madness? They are everywhere," Cassie whispered, pointing to objects in the room. The thermostat, the toy elephant magnet on the mini-fridge. "They love to watch, and they pay to watch." Cassie wasn't an accomplice. She was a victim who had broken. She told Sarah about a website run by an anonymous group that rented Hostel and Airbnb rooms. They turned the lives of the occupants into a reality show, a live stream. "Look," Cassie held out her phone. The screen displayed a grid of dozens of small windows. In one of them was their room, in real time, and below that window was a chat. People were discussing how Sarah was searching for the cameras. "Lol. This newbie is funny. She thinks she'll find them all. The red light is a classic. Did anyone notice she hasn't used the shower? I want to see her take down the elephant. I tried to leave, Cassie said, her voice trembling, but they know where I live. They sent me footage from cameras on my street. They said if I leave, they'll publish. She didn't finish, but Sarah understood. They were using their vulnerabilities as leverage. Sarah looked at the camera in the smoke detector. The red light was blinking in sync with her pulse. We can't just break them, Sarah said. If we do, they'll get confirmation that we know. They'll release the entire archive. We have to make them turn them off themselves. Sarah, the photographer, began to design the composition. The next 3 days became a performance. Sarah and Cassie played 2 roles. 1. Paranoia. They constantly talked about the cameras, loudly and intentionally. They covered themselves with towels, changed clothes in the bathroom, and left the light on. Mundane. They suddenly stopped talking and acted as if they didn't care. This was done to bore the viewers and the operator. Sarah began to leave hints in the frame. She placed her cameras and lenses on the desk, deliberately exposing them to the audience. She wanted the operator to realize he was watching a colleague. One day, Sarah attached a reflective film to her bunk, the kind used to soften studio light. It was aimed to redirect the light from the window directly onto the smoke detector and mirror, creating a flare for the lenses. We have to make them lose interest, Sarah said. They want drama, and we'll give them boredom and technical issues. Cassie finally laughed, the first time since Sarah had met her. It was a nervous but genuine laugh. On the 4th day, as Sarah sat at the desk, studying, in reality she was writing the blind spot scheme again. She heard a quiet click. She looked up. The red light on the smoke detector went out. This time not from a flash, but permanently. It's off, she whispered. Don't rush, Cassie replied. They waited another hour. They turned on the front-facing camera. The purple dots in the mirror were also gone. Had they won? Sarah cautiously climbed onto the desk and removed the smoke detector. It was wired in, but inside was a small module that she immediately smashed against the wall. They quickly packed their belongings. They had to leave before the operator, or the director, as Cassie called him, realized they had left the frame. Before opening the door, Sarah turned around. Did you see this? Cassie asked, pointing to the nightstand. Where a useless nightlight once stood, there was now a photograph. It was a perfectly composed studio photo of Sarah, one she had taken a year ago for her portfolio. A shot that had never been published. On the back of the photo was a handwritten code. Sarah understood. It was the IP address of their room. It was a farewell note from the director. He acknowledged her professionalism and simultaneously warned her that he knew everything about her, even what wasn't in the frame. He's been watching you longer than you've been here, Cassie said. They quietly left the room and walked down the stairs. The reception desk was empty. When they stepped out into the bright Los Angeles light, Sarah felt not relief, but heaviness. She couldn't shake the feeling that her personal data now belonged to someone else. She looked at Cassie. "Where are you going now?" Sarah asked. Cassie smiled, but there was only fatigue in her eyes. "I'm going home. I think they are bored with my dull show for a while." They parted ways. Sarah hailed a taxi. She looked out the window, and every glowing object a traffic light. A surveillance camera on the corner, even the sun's reflection in the glass, seemed like a new red light. She knew she had left the hostel, but she wasn't sure she had exited the frame. As the taxi passed an old park, Sarah suddenly felt an urge. She typed the IP address the director had left her into a search engine. A password-protected site appeared. She tried entering her birth year. It didn't work. She tried entering the code from her smashed smoke detector. The page loaded. It was a forum. It had only 2 topics. First, The Nomad's Rest, Channel 304, boring, archive released. Second, new project, The Photographer, LA, equipment delivered. Sarah closed the laptop as if trying to cut off her arm. Cold sweat soaked her shirt again. The director knew where she was going. He knew she would look for him, and he was already preparing for the next show, in which she was the main star. Her psychological horror was just beginning. And this time, there were no walls or smoke detectors to hide behind, only the reflection of her own life in the red light. The taxi stopped at an unremarkable hotel in the Santa Monica area. Sarah chose it randomly, paying with her remaining savings. But she knew a new location wouldn't change anything. She was already part of the show. She entered her tiny room. The first thing she did before turning on the light was examine the ceiling, walls, and outlets. No red light, no suspicious spots, but it brought no relief. It was only a pause before the next act. Her gaze fell on the laptop lying on the bed, the IP address left on the back of her studio photograph. This gesture was not just a warning, but a challenge. The director wanted her to know he could reach her anywhere. Sarah, trembling, opened the page again. This time she didn't close it. The second forum thread, new project, The Photographer, LA, equipment delivered, was active. She clicked it. A message from user, director, scene number 1, The Sleeping Whale. Hotel, room 112, view from the window onto the street where she just exited the taxi. Standard equipment, a USB charger camera in the corner outlet, and an audio bug in the phone. We'll have to settle for visuals and sound. Our lead actress knows we're here. We need a reaction. The audience is craving psychosis. Let's give her what she's looking for. Sarah felt her lungs constrict. He wasn't hiding. He was announcing his presence. He was leading her like a puppet. She slowly looked down at the white landline phone on the nightstand. Inside its receiver there was probably a tiny audio bug. Then to the corner outlet. There, half hidden by furniture, was the USB charger. Rage, mixed with panic, consumed her body. She leaped up, grabbed the phone, and hurled it to the floor, shattering the plastic casing. Then, finding a screwdriver in her bag, she tore the charger from the outlet with frantic force, breaking it into pieces. She felt better for a second. Then she returned to the laptop. A new message from director appeared on the forum. Excellent. An Oscar-worthy reaction. Our star is having a meltdown. Clearly she needs a small punishment for property damage. Applause, gentlemen. Scene number 2 begins when she leaves the room. We're raising the stakes. Her gaze fell on the comments under the post. They were instantaneous. Psychosis. She's so hot when she's angry. Director, you're a genius. How did you know where she'd go? Now she thinks she's free. Sarah slammed the laptop shut, as if trying to amputate her own arm. She sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and cried for the first time. It wasn't a cry of fear, but a cry of powerlessness. She was exposed, and an anonymous crowd was devouring her. Sarah didn't sleep that morning. She sat on the floor with her back against the bed, staring at the door. She couldn't leave. To leave meant starting scene number 2. At 9:15, there was a knock. Tentative, quiet, delivery, a muffled voice said through the door. Sarah froze. She hadn't ordered anything. I didn't order anything, she answered hoarsely. Flowers for a Miss Sarrett, the voice clarified. Sarah slowly got up and went to the peephole. A box with a bouquet stood on the hallway carpet, and next to it was a man in a black uniform with a baseball cap. Just leave them, she said. Can't. I need a signature, he replied. Sarah realized it was a trap. He wanted her to open the door. I won't sign. Please leave them, she repeated, pressing her forehead against the cold door. In response, silence. Then she heard footsteps retreating on the carpet. She waited 5 minutes, then slowly opened the door. The hallway was empty, only the box with the bouquet and a red bag with a camera store logo. Sarah grabbed the box and the bag. closed the door and double-locked it. The bag contained a new, latest model microlens for a phone and a long, flexible mop handle. On top was a note. Scene number 2 should be vibrant. Don't worry about the props. We'll provide everything needed for quality filming. Good luck with your search. Don't forget to check the ventilation. Director. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Don't forget to check the ventilation. It was the exact repetition of Cassie's parting message from her first mini-story. They were communicating through her life. Now that she had a new lens, Sarah could see the invisible. It was a gift intended to prolong the game. She attached the lens to her phone and, armed with the mop handle, began a systematic search. First, the ventilation in the bathroom. The lens showed 3 tiny holes, hidden beneath a layer of dust and paint. The infrared dots glowed like the night sky. Next, the TV. Behind the manufacturer's logo, a barely visible slit. But the biggest shock awaited her in the bouquet. Among the red roses in the very center stood a perfectly crafted latex flower in whose petal an IR dot glowed. A bouquet camera. It was delivered right into her hands to film her reaction. Sarah felt her sanity cracking. This wasn't just observation. It was an intrusion into her private space, taken to the point of absurdity and beauty. The director was an artist of a perverse reality show. She didn't smash the cameras. She decided to use them. Sarah found a mirrored acrylic sheet in the room and began methodically aiming and reflecting light. She used the phone's flash to blind the lenses. She created a chaos of light and reflections that made the footage unusable for viewing. She wanted the director to feel blinded. Returning to the laptop, she opened the forum. A new message from director. Scene number 2. Brilliant. The star is using our tools against us. She is learning. But dear Sarah, you forgot about the audience. They need drama, not abstraction. They are getting bored with white noise. We are setting a timer. If you do not leave the room by midnight to start scene number 3, we will publish Cassie's entire archive. We know you are an empath. You won't let her burn. Sarah looked at the clock. 11:15 p.m. She had less than an hour. This was blackmail, calculated on her conscience. She couldn't allow Cassie's story, her humiliation, to become public. She quickly gathered the essentials: her passport, money, her laptop. She looked at the bouquet camera. Instead of smashing it, Sarah took a marker and carefully drew a tiny, perfect red circle on the petal where the lens was, exactly like the one in the smoke detector. A sign of respect. She walked out into the corridor exactly at 11:55 p.m. She didn't go to the exit. She went to the roof. The roof was dark and loud with wind, but she was alone. She opened the laptop. The forum. A new message from director. Scene number 3. The roof. The pinnacle of drama. Where to now, Sarah? A jump? Suicide? Or a triumph? Sarah didn't type into the chat. She opened the professional web analytics program she used to study traffic on her photography sites. She inserted the director's IP address. She knew there were hundreds of viewers on the forum, but the director was alone. And at this moment, he was engrossed in her. He was monitoring her steps, her gaze. He was too busy directing. At this very moment, when the director was most focused on her show, his defenses were minimal. Sarah calculated his geolocation from his IP address. It was an address in a Los Angeles suburb. It was a real address. She took a screenshot of the screen with the map and the address, and then attached it to her final chat entry. Her message was short but absolute. Scene number 4. I'm coming to your house. The show is over. I start filming now. She closed the laptop and finally felt free. She was no longer the object. She had become the predator. Sarah descended from the roof. She didn't go to the director. She went to the police. She had the real address, a screenshot of his admission of surveillance, and the physical evidence of the cameras from the hotel. Sarah was no longer afraid of the red light, because now she knew it could cut both ways.